How have you made a rude person's day worse? Today on the train I sat next to a woman who was angry that I sat next to her because she wanted the 2 seats to herself. As I sat there she kept mouthing under her breath how she just wanted to sit there alone. Blah blah blah. Despite the fact that I wanted to tell her that it was public transportation and she needed to get over it, I kept my mouth shut. A few minutes later a large woman with a large purse comes and stands in the same car I was in. I get her attention and tell her that she could have my seat. She huffs and puffs her way to me and I help her sit down while grinning at the angry woman who was upset I'd sat beside her. I enjoyed watching her head almost explode from anger as the other large woman's rolls and purse pressed against her for the rest of the ride. I work in local theater, and we have a lot of rude, awful women who are part of local ballet schools come through our venue who are the mothers of the dancers. Once this woman rang up wanting seats to an almost sold-out ballet performance that had been on sale for 4 months the day before the show, and did nothing but abuse me for 5 minutes because she left buying them too late, whined about how she shouldn't have to pay for her kids, whined that we should get a bigger venue, it seats just under 500, straight face, then put me on hold while she rang 3 of her relatives to see if they wanted seats too. She was positively awful. The seats I was about to sell her were the only ones in the theater left, and they were good seats. While I'm on hold, the grandma of one of the ballerinas comes to the desk and asks if we have any seats left, as she'd been in hospital and couldn't buy them earlier, but said she'd understand if we were booked out. I put the phone with the on-hold music down and sold this old lady the last seats for the show, and gave her an invite to our next year's dance season for her granddaughter and herself, so she'd know exactly when all the important dates were coming. She thanked me over and over, and she's now one of our regulars and brings her grandkids to our shows. 2 minutes after the old lady leaves, the bitch on the other end finally takes me off hold and says she wants the remaining seats that we have left. I tell her, "Sorry, we've just sold out while you had me on hold, I'm afraid. Better luck next year. Anything else I can help you with?" She was choking with rage on the other end of the phone. It was fantastic. I watched a lazy shopper park their grocery cart right behind another person's car instead of putting it in the cart return. I got out of my car, ran up and moved the cart, and put it behind her car. I then ran off and watched her have to get back out of her car since she couldn't back out, and then finally proceed to put up her cart the right way. I felt like a champion of the people. I was at a Walmart, and a lady got in her car, rolled down her window, and started throwing papers out. I walked up to her car and picked up the paper and put it under her windshield wiper and walked away as I was riddled with curses. I was working as a manager in a big nightclub about a year ago. I don't wear a uniform, but have a radio and run the security team. The venue has a great smoking section that looks out onto the street. One night the venue was packed, so I did my usual roam making sure that there were no problems. However, it was too packed to walk through the smoking section, so I walked down the street instead, but could still very easily see into the smoking section. One guy stares me down, then calls me over, and starts swearing at me for no reason and telling me that pieces of shit like you could never even get into a venue like this. He obviously had no idea I was the manager. However, I didn't want to have security get into a fight inside with him. The guy kept telling me he would punch me out, etc., and was clearly trying to look macho to impress someone. So I agreed and told him to come and meet me outside, and he could even have a free swing. He puts his drink down, takes off his jacket, and storms outside. Once he walked outside, I walked back inside and told security not to let him back in. The look on his face when he realized I ran the place was priceless, and then the realization that he couldn't get back into the club was amazing. It was the easiest and most fun removal I have ever done. Was in theater quite a few years back, some action flick, I think Jean-Claude Van Damme, and there were 2 16-year-old or so kids in front of me who were, in turn, behind a group of smaller kids, say 12 or so. I was alone. The wife hates action movies. I quickly noticed that the 2 older kids were fucking with the younger ones, kicking their seat backs, throwing popcorn at them, flicking spit at them, the works. The theater was crowded, so the little guys couldn't move. Finally, one of the ditchetines leans forward and I think flicked one kid's ear. When the little kid turned around to glare, flicking ditchetine says, "You got a problem with that, shithead?" His friend guffaws. When the flickmeister sits back, I haul off and give him a decent slap upside the head, knocking his noggin into his friends. They both turn and half jump out of their seats, and then pause when they see me. I am 6'2", 225 pounds. I stood up and said, "You got a problem with that, shitheads?" They looked at each other, and then turned to sit back down. I said. "You sit there, and I'm gonna make you as miserable as you've been making those guys in front of you." They shuffled on out of the theater. The younger kids all turned and said, "Thank you, sir." Heard this from a DJ in my hometown. He's pushing his cart of groceries out of the store and over to his car when a woman pulls into the handicapped spot in front of the store. No placard, no handicapped plates. Jumps out of the car without so much as a limp and heads into the store. He gives her the stink eye about taking up a handicapped spot, and she snarls, "Deal with it," and sashays into the store. The guy is pissed. He sees a couple of cops who are leaning against their cars talking. They hadn't seen it. So he goes over and tells them the story. They smile and say they'll handle it. He puts his groceries in his car, and as he's pushing his cart back to the store to put it in the rack, good guy DJ, he sees the cops have blocked the lady's car with theirs, and were leaning against their car waiting for her. As he's putting his cart in the rack, the lady comes out of the store with her purchase, sees the cops, and almost shits. The fine in CA is $250 to $500 for a first offense. Priceless. He walks over to her and says, "I dealt with it." I used to work for the Department of Motor Vehicles, and the one I worked at had pretty limited parking. Surprise. I had left for lunch, came back and was having a hard time finding a place to park. I finally found a spot, so I drove up to it and put my signal on, showing that I was waiting for it. People, in my experience, usually respect this and continue on. Not this time. Just as the car was backing out, after I had waited a few minutes, a car came from the opposite side of the lot, made eye contact with me, and then shot right into the parking space. I was so mad because now I would be late after looking for a new spot. As I drove past the woman that had taken the spot, I just shook my head and she responded by shrugging her shoulders, smiling, mouthing the words, "Oh well," to me, and then ran her finger from her eye down her cheek as if to mock me crying about it. I continued into work, got in trouble for being late, but had actually forgotten about the incident until whose number gets called to my station. But Miss Spot Stealer herself. The look on her face was priceless. Keep in mind that I'm not your average DMV worker. I understand that stuff happens and waive penalties all the time and treat my customers with respect because I believe that what goes around comes around, and I know how crappy it is to wait at the DMV all day. I'm usually so nice about getting penalties taken off of people's accounts that I get in trouble for it at times. So, I greet Spot Stealer as nice as I would anyone else. In fact, it may have been nicer than I normally would be. She may have thought I didn't recognize her. Her registration is far past due, with hundreds due in penalties. I let her tell me her whole sob story, then finally tell her that she owes in full because she was aware of her due date. She argues it a little until, out of sight from my manager, I mouth the words, "Oh well," and drag my finger from my eye to my cheek, mocking her tears. At that point she puts her head down and proceeds to take out her card and pay the full amount because yes, we do take debit cards. What goes around comes around. I work at a retail location that does returns strictly only with tags on the clothes. There was one customer who was exceptionally rude to our staff. She called both women working dumb bitches, which pissed me off. She came up to the register telling me she'll probably return all the things she's buying and is just trying to impress her friends. So I took all the tags off the clothes when I was bagging everything. I bettered the world that day. What was her reaction? I did it so she didn't notice. I was riding my bike to work one day, and when crossing a street, in the legal zone with a walk sign, a woman ran me over. She drove through the crosswalk looking to turn right and ran right into me. She stopped after I got bumped hard enough by her fender to take a spill and have some bruising all down my side. She gave me an exasperated, "My bad," wave and continued to talk on her cell phone, ignoring me as I picked myself and my bike up. I walked right up to her open window, grabbed her cell phone from her ear, and chucked it into a nearby parking lot as hard as I could. I swear that was the farthest I have thrown anything in my life. She gaped at me in shock as I struggled back onto my bike and slowly rode off, fuming yet victorious. Then a half-mile farther on my trek I got attacked by a goose. Not my best day. How have you made a rude person's day worse? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.